Hey Jeff, how's it going?
Hi Jay, how are you?
Man, not too bad, man. Not too bad at all.
It's getting close to the holidays.
You know what? I'm getting ready to wind down for the holidays. As a matter of fact, I'm looking forward to the time off.
That's perfect. Good for you.
Yeah,
Good
it's
for you.
been,
I caught a cold just in time for the holidays. My son's sick, so.
oh man, that's too bad.
But I think it'll be good because I'll probably be well by then. So.
Yeah. Yeah, well, hopefully it'll be gone by the time holidays.
Yeah. So do you know, is there a session today or did it get canceled? I didn't see any notes.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I'm here. I mean, I that's a that's a good indicator.
Yeah.
I don't believe we can. No, we canceled the last one because we didn't have an agenda. I think we wanted to close out a couple of things. Close out a couple of things in this one.
All right, cool. I've been active somewhat over in the best practices in education SIG, and then I've been working with Brian Fox here at Sonotype and then Jonathan Meadows at Citi, and they recommended to come join us as well. So this is the first one on this session or this group that I've been in.
Yeah, absolutely, and happy you're here. We're definitely trying to get, we're trying to get all the SIGs involved that have well, I want to say, we're trying to get everyone involved, but especially the other working groups and SIGs that we feel like have a dog in this fight, right? And really it's all from best practices to end users. That those are two of the working groups specifically that we'd love to have involved and just because it requires it, right? I'm heavily involved on the salsa side too, and
Okay.
and so it's one hand washes the other, and we both have to wash the face on this one.
I understand.
Yeah. I just put the notes doc up on the chat.
All right, thanks for doing that, Jay. I'm also sharing my screen with the notes doc up. So, we really only had one kind of large topic today, and then kind of like a fun one. Would love to submit a request for a goose icon, being in the OpenSSF, and S2C2 kind of sounds like R2D2, so kind of thinking of a goose that might somewhat resemble R2D2 would be pretty funny. But yeah, do we want to go ahead and get started, or?
Yeah, we're almost at 5 minutes. At 5 minutes past. Let's go ahead and do it.
All right. So switching over to this doc, and maybe I will. Oops, wrong button. And drop this into the meeting chat. So I just got started writing a strategy doc, because S2C2F is new and there's a lot going on in OpenSSF, and so it would be great to start to plan out all the ways that S2C2F can integrate across the OpenSSF to make sure that we are partnering with and becoming a part of the broader, OpenSSF story. And so, this is I want to say a rough draft. As soon as we start getting here into the opportunities, it starts getting really weak. And I was hoping that participants on this call might even be able to suggest other ideas, and then we can start to kind of codify how and where the S2C2F can like fit across certain things. There were a few ideas that were brought up previously, such as, obviously partnership with Salsa. That's the whole reason why we're in the supply chain integrity working group. And then additionally, other folks have mentioned, how do we bring this in as part of the security knowledge framework, and the documentation that they have around like guide to evaluating OSS. And so I think there's lots of opportunities, and I wanted to, use this as a working meeting to discuss other areas for collaboration. But so up at the top, we have, this was contributed in October, and we're a specification that provides guidance on secure consumption of OSS. And it's within the supply chain integrity working group, but also has relevance across other working groups. The purpose of this document is to outline the strategy for where and how we should plan to collaborate and integrate with various other pieces. If I were to describe the goals of S2C2F, this is what I had kind of come up with off the top of my head. Also open for ideas to iterate and elaborate here. But I think like awareness that there are these supply chain threats that are specific to open source, and understanding that a guide like S2C2F is here to directly help mitigate those issues. And I think that collaboration across the OpenSSF is necessary in order to help spread that awareness. Community engagement, that's incredibly important, because this is a must. This is a threat-based risk reduction approach. So as threats change, we need to make sure we're keeping the framework up to date. Isaac, you have your hand up. Oh, and Jay has his hand up too. I don't know who is first.
I think Jay was first, actually. I saw Jay's hand up, and it reminded me that I should put my hand up before asking. Jay is keeping me on point with respect to my manners. I appreciate that.
I didn't want to just jump in, and thank you for that, Isaac. So I wanted to, along with what Adrian said earlier, I wanted to bring to the front a lot of the conversations that are happening across the OpenSSF at large, right? So in the TAC meeting, and TAC meetings now for the last few weeks, maybe a couple of months, it's been talked about streamlining working groups, streamlining SIGs, and streamlining the efforts at large across the OpenSSF. So this is actually timely in our approach here to make sure that we are reaching across the other working groups and reaching across the other SIGs to find ways to collaborate and find those points that actually bridge, and those points that are actually in synergy with one another. Because the OpenSSF at large is looking across the working groups. We have a thing called the Diagrammer Society, and we're actually proposed to be a new SIG underneath the TAC, where we're actually looking at the whole of the OpenSSF, the whole of every working group and the whole of every SIG, to say, hey, where are there areas that we should be talking? Where are there areas that we should be working together? So I wanted to know, while Adrian is doing this, I'm gonna toss it back over to him, but I wanted to make it clear that this is actually quite timely in its approach, and the effort here is to make sure that we're branching and reaching out and bridging where we should be, so that it's one continuous flow across the supply chain security spectrum. So I'll stop there. Go ahead, Isaac.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. Couldn't agree more with you with respect to timeliness. The question I had was around awareness. That I was wondering if you see this as different or having a different flavor from OpenSSF's goal. If I think about OpenSSF as a whole, like part of the goal of OpenSSF is to talk about, or even the supply chain integrity working group is talking about supply chain threats specific to open source. And so I was wondering if this awareness goal, I don't know, I guess as I think about let me back up. As I think about the supply chain integrity working group and what that's for and what its goals are, it seems like this awareness goal might exist at actually a higher level, and it's not specific to S2C2F. It's actually, the supply chain integrity working group speaks to this awareness goal. Is that how you think of it as well, Adrian?
I mean, yeah, and so partly for me, this was an exercise for me to learn more about the OpenSSF. I think I'm relatively new to the OpenSSF, and so I'm not aware of everything across the board myself. And so this kind of forced me to start looking. If I could better align this document with the OpenSSF's goals, I'm all for that.
That makes sense. And then the opportunities for collaboration. I mean, it sounds like, as I remember when S2C2F was coming into OpenSSF, it was the supply chain integrity working group, the end users, and then the best practices working group, I think, were the 3 candidate landing spots. Is that right? And it feels to me like those S2C2F landed ultimately in the supply chain integrity working group, but certainly, Jonathan over in end users, and then, the best practices, it seems like their interest in S2C2F probably continues. And so those would be threads to pull on with respect to collaboration there. But then you've not gotten to that section yet, so I'll shut up for now.
Yeah. No need to shut up. It's all good.
Isaac, to just answer you briefly, I've made it a point. I've competing priorities and travel and everything else prevented me from attending those working group meetings for the last couple of weeks. But I've been making it a point to go to each one of those working group meetings as well. And I know I've seen you there too, in some of them. But yeah, absolutely, can't just let the buck stop, and we do need to say, hey, we're here, come aboard. So it's something that's going to be at the top of my list in the coming year, to make it a point in each one of these working group meetings if there's any questions left in the meeting, to say, hey guys, by the way, S2C2F we're meeting, love for you to join, and keep that going every single one of those meetings.
Great.
Speaking of joining, I suppose I'd pick up. So Bill Tork here, William, if you look at it, IBM would be the company I'm affiliated with. Folks from my group have been popped up in OSSF. So there was Jeff Borek, for those that know that name, that works a lot with Brian Bellendorf. Jamie Thomas, the chair of the governing board, is my boss. Melba Lopez is somebody that's been pretty involved in Salsa. So I have folks in my group that are sort of scattered about. This new initiative sort of caught my eye. It's one that I sort of got embedded in because of the sort of consumption side of it is kind of a unique element. I would ask one question though, kind of the goal and awareness. Maybe it's do we think there really is an awareness problem? 1 year post Log4j, we're like, 3 days past the Log4j anniversary of the 9th, 4 days past it. Do we truly think there is an awareness problem at this point in time?
So I'll take this, and Adrian, you jump in. I do want to preface my comment by saying awareness to threats specific to open source versus awareness to threats specific across the entire supply chain. You do have the whole supply chain threat landscape, and then of course looking at all those that's related to that. But when we talk about specific to open source, there have been a few and more recent attacks that are more social, what I consider to be social engineering in nature, right? And those can't be overlooked as well. So when we talk about awareness to supply chain threats, Log4j included as well, but really digging in on open source itself, both upstream contributions and the threats that emerge when you're upstream contributing, and of course downstream into product development, and then what does that actually look like across the spectrum of different organizations who have different risk appetites and of course accept those kind of risks. So I mean, William, your question is sound, but I do want to make sure that we tease out both of those concepts and then bring them back to center.
Yeah.
Got it. And I will highlight one particular thing. I know you haven't gotten to it since I spoke up, but is the tooling innovation, I think, is a key part of it, right? There's a lot of concepts in S2C2F that there is no tooling to support today. You know, simple one, I think it's level 2 of maturity or something. It's about scan for end of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no scanner that looks for end of life. The reason there's no scanner that looks for end of life, there's no database of end of life software. And so we've talked to pretty much every scanner vendor out there. And none of them are excited about, like, hey guys, you realize you'd be like the first, if you just went out and did the research and built an end of life database, like everybody would come to you, you make billions of dollars. Nobody's tackling that problem. So there's some big nuts like that would be awesome to tackle.
So yeah. William, I'll make this last comment because I want to stay on the path that Adrian's on, but I'll say this: over in the CDF, there's a team working on the supply chain maturity model, and it's another team out of Google that's working on that. But they focus on what happens afterwards with artifacts and with archiving and everything else. They're doing so much, but the one thing that's not mentioned there, and I said this in that meeting, is, hey guys, what about end of life? So you're hitting on you're onto something that I have actually said many times before. One thing that I don't see, which is just as much as part of the entire spectrum, is end of life and what happens there. How do things get archived there? What, all that kind of stuff. So you hit on something very good. What I would say, welcome. We have a whole repo with issues and PRs. For the love of God.
Yeah, understood. Been digging through. And I'll highlight, it was things like the fact that this framework had things like end of life in it that is unique that other people have ignored. That's what, again, attracted my attention and got me showing up. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. And Bill, thank you so much for, can I call you Bill? Is that it? Okay.
Yeah. William gets my attention if I'm being unruly. Otherwise, Bill's fine.
Okay. Got it. Okay. William, thank you so much for introducing yourself. Apologies, I didn't give space for
Not a problem. I snuck in quietly a few minutes
to,
after the start.
Yeah. And so you asked, is awareness a problem? And I think that's a great question to ask. We have Jeff from Sonatype here, and Sonatype publishes an annual report, State of the Software Supply Chain Security, and it largely focuses on open source supply chain security. And I think that report is a testament to the fact that we need to educate the masses that there are threats here, and the threat is growing. And so I think there's something to be said there, and I continue to see startup companies focused on supply chain. They're doing like webinars to educate the public about these open source threats, and so like education of the threats is like just a so and not only is it awareness that the threats are there, but then also like awareness that there is a guide that exists that's backed by the OpenSSF, as best practices to move to. The drive toward tooling innovation, you're 100% spot on. There are some gaps when you look at the requirements. There are some gaps. We have developed some internal capabilities, and obviously we're considering how do we bring those out to help
as have we.
And so those are things that we want to continue to work on, and I think it just kind of highlights like, hey, these are useful ways to mitigate against these threats, and we need more tools to start offering this to really protect the industry at large.
Yeah, I think I put a little blurb in there, and I was just working on some some papers in the last 2 weeks on this, so the data is pretty recent. Like just checked in the last week, and so like 30% of the log4j downloads from Central with Sonatype's the custodian of are still vulnerable versions. Like that like a year after, and that's like if you're a consumer, that's dead scary. I think most people don't know that. They think, oh, there's a problem, someone announced it, the fix went in. I worked at another company before coming back to Sonatype this year, SourceGraph, which is mostly code search, similar to GitHub's code search, and the predominant focus of development teams were just trying to get SBOMs, right? Which I think is the wrong way to look at it. Like it's important to see what's in there, but just a list of this stuff. But that's really, they've overcorrected, I think, on that because of the executive order when you have problems like this still existing. That's tool agnostic. That's just data from our site.
We actually see most of our vendors, I'll share, that they're focusing on SBOM because of the executive order, and they're using SBOM as their get out of the jail free card. So a vendor will give us an SBOM,
exactly.
we'll say, hey, you got some log4j in here. And they'll say, oh, yeah, we haven't had a chance to fix it yet. But dude, we gave you the SBOM, we're transparent.
Right.
So you're aware of the vulnerability.
Exactly
We've done our part by making you be aware. So they're seeing it as a get out of jail free card. So I guess where I'm going is, in some cases, it may not be awareness of the supply chain threats. Maybe the key is awareness of how to address the supply chain threats, which is a slight twist to the awareness. I think everybody gets it. I think everybody has different opinions of how to address it.
I like it. Yay. Look at that. Updates
I've
live in
contributed
production.
something now. See you guys later next week.
Obviously, adoption by the industry to reduce open source supply chain risk. There's many ways to achieve this, but just some initial thoughts. If we could get this recognized across the industry as a best practice, adoption of the S2C2F into the OpenSSF was kind of like the first step on this journey of helping others, and then pursuing international standardization is another to kind of lend credibility to it. And then drive tooling innovation. Yes, this is a huge one, because I think there are capabilities that developers need to protect them from accidental consumption. Scanning end of life. I believe the OpenSSF scorecard has some end of life data, maybe not all, but we do have a system, like at Microsoft, that kind of tracks that internally, and we advise users to move off of end of life stuff and onto something else. But again, these are all opportunities for us to make everyone better. And so I think we're here to help kind of discuss those things. And I also just want to make sure that we're not working in a silo. There needs to be conscious efforts to leverage other initiatives where it makes sense for the S2C2F to be involved. So we want to get plugged in and help where we can, be like a good collaborative, working across the border kind of member of OpenSSF. Isaac.
Yeah, so one of the things I was just going to add on adoption, and one of the things I've been working on a similar doc for Salsa. You're about a month ahead of me, I think, but it's also going into 2023. And one of the things that occurred to me about adoption is there's two sides to this, which I think are equally important. One is, hey, you can increase security of the ecosystem by encouraging people to adopt your practices, and that's part one. Part two is, if people adopting the practices make attestations about their adoption, then downstream consumers of their artifacts can then start to implement policy based on, does this upstream artifact meet, this S2C2F level or whatever. And so there's kind of like two parts to the adoption effect. There's kind of the inherent value of a software producing organization adopting these best practices. And then there's also the potential for downstream to implement policy based on the practices upstream. And so the example for Salsa is, people putting, admissions policy on, for their runtime, saying we're not going to put anything, we're not going to deploy anything that has dependencies that are Salsa level 2 or below, for example. And so, that's a, I guess what I'm saying is that there's a flip side to the adoption of practices, which is, yes, adopt them, but then produce an attestation to say what you've adopted to allow downstream consumers of your artifacts to implement policy and secure themselves yet further. And so I think, Salsa has, the provenance format and the in toto attestation, which is part of the framework. It would be super cool to see S2C2F go that same route, and so that upstream adopters of S2C2F could make attestations to affect downstream policy, and you get the kind of double whammy effect of overall end-to-end security. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I'm definitely with you with that vision. I love it. I think that's a great. Yeah, so I put a bullet here. So we can elaborate on this later, but
great. Yeah.
Part of adoption is developing attestations, and part of tooling innovation will also be generating those attestations of policy conformance.
Totally awesome. And then ultimately decisioning, based on, do I want to put this into my runtime based on what I know about how it was produced and so on.
100%.
Cool.
Yeah. So this was kind of like my brain dump to try to at least generate the outline of places for me to start digging deeper to see if there is opportunity for collaboration here. But so like the supply chain integrity working group obviously has Salsa. So there's a lot of folks, I just want to capture like main points of contact, and S2C2F is advertised as a consumption-focused framework that pairs well with production-focused frameworks such as Salsa. So finding opportunities to create a bridge with Salsa is like vital, and is like the main reason why we joined the supply chain integrity working group. So this is, obviously first in the list.
We should combine the two and then call it the whole enchilada. If you put the two together, it's the whole enchilada. Pardon me.
That's clever. I haven't heard that one yet, so that was a good one.
I think we're never going to see Jay again. Jay has just disappeared.
Yeah, I've apparently let too much of my personality come out in the first meeting here. I apologize for that.
Oh, come on.
Jumping on down, best practices working group. They have the secure knowledge framework. And Randall was the one that had originally offered up the idea of, getting the S2C2F in with the rest of the education materials. And if memory serves, I'm blanking on the name, but we also got this link to the guide to evaluating OSS. So I just need to spin up a thread and start working with Randall and others on how do we get this added. Additionally, like right alongside the SKF, there's the education SIG, which was also brought up by Randall, I believe. And how do we make to serve our awareness goals? How do we get this into the education SIG if that's appropriate, right? Like all of these things need to be evaluated and assessed. Scorecards project is interesting because we just talked about like end of life, for example. So maybe that's something we want to like double click on with the Scorecards project and see how can we make that data more robust or comprehensive, that others can start to trust it for making decisions about getting off of end of life products. And there's probably other opportunities to collaborate as well. Let me just actually capture that idea. Expand on end of life detection.
That's a
I'm
great
assuming
idea.
everybody who uses Scorecard is probably like us with our extended Scorecard to do an end of life detection. And so if you have a given repo or open source component, you can run Scorecard to tell, it'll tell you end of life or not, or nearing end of life based on activity. But that's different than having a big old database of the, 190,000 things are end of life. And then the one thing that went end of life yesterday, that's more of a ongoing crawler challenge.
Gotcha. Yeah. Was somebody else also trying to jump in? Okay. The best practices badge. So, when you think about, adoption, there's the carrot and the stick, right? And so the best practices badge is kind of like the carrot approach to, encouraging folks to adopt best practices. And, so there's, some questions there about how can S2C2F be involved with this, if appropriate, again, but I at least want to start the discussion. There's also some package manager best practices. Again, this is all part of the supply chain integrity working group. So all these links came off of their landing page in their repo. So I just got to go dig some more here. Existing guidelines for developing and distributing secure software. There's probably opportunities for us to include references to the S2C2F within these guidelines. And if anybody else has any other ideas, I think we want to build out this kind of like network of here's all the touch points that we need to have across that working group. And as Isaac pointed out earlier, the end users working group definitely has expressed interest with the S2C2F. So we need to start some sort of a V team here to start working with them on, how does the S2C2F fit within their charter? How can they leverage it, or reuse it, so on and so forth. Security tooling working group has the SBOM everywhere.
Just before you move on beyond that, Jeff and I are kind of here because we're trying to figure out how to do this exact exercise from the end users working group, and S2C2 is on the list. So,
yes,
I
love it. We're on your list and you're on our list.
Whole group, but we are trying to figure out how do we bridge these things. So
it's working. That's great. I love it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I think there's we know there's something there. We just gotta get it on paper and build a plan around it, and then we can make it happen. Thank you for letting me know that, though. That's exciting. The security.
Can I ask a sort of stupid question?
Yeah.
For like this, for the awareness and the education pieces, and working with these other groups, what's the target audience for this group? Like, who do you see consuming it? Is it developers that are coding today, or is it higher in the chain, like decision makers, leadership within engineering?
So when we wrote the S2C2F, and maybe I should just jump to here's our markdown. You can tell me
RTFM too if it's somewhere in there.
Well, just to give you a super high level, we talk about the threats, and we talk about these practices, and then we go a level deeper down to the requirements. So I just want to jump to, we have these high level practices that are solution agnostic, and they can be applied to any scenario. So the target audience, for just looking at the high level practices, is more like the CISOs and engineering managers that really just want to understand like the methodology. When you want to get into the nitty gritty, then you start looking at like, so see, we have the 8 practices, and we broke it down into a maturity model and what each level, the theme for each level. And then here's how to assess where your organization is within the maturity model, like a set of questions. You can go interview developers, because developer at the end of the day is the one that's affected by these. because it's how they consume open source, and are they using the right DevSecOps tools in place to help them manage their use of open source, and then also secure their use of open source. And so now you can see that we've organized each requirement into each practice. So we've like further broken it down, and this has a specific audience of like, well, these are the people that are implementing it. So these are going to be like the individual developers or engineers that need to go, adhere to these requirements. So it has different altitudes of audiences as you go further and deeper into the doc.
Yeah, so that was really helpful. I appreciate it. And I'll dig in there deeper as well. In working on the education and best practices SIG, it seems like there is and I could be wrong because I've only been there for maybe a month or two. It seems like there is sort of a focus to the left on the developer, which makes sense, but it doesn't have courses or sort of learning pathways for like that leadership level as well, and some of the things we're talking about here. So is the goal to take like your framework and the education here and sort of allow it to be published by like what the education best practices group are doing, or is it to weave it into all of their stuff, both? I don't know.
Yeah, so I would love the goals to kind of, where you have similar goals to us. I would love for us to kind of like, leverage each other to both accomplish those goals. So if your goal is to spread awareness of the threats, we've already created an enumerated list, holistic list of threats that are specifically targeting OSS, with links to real world articles of like how it's affected somebody. I don't want us to like capitalize on like whatever sort of publication you're working on, but can we tastefully reference the S2C2F if it makes sense for the audience when whatever they're reading? It's hard to answer without example.
I think for the purposes of education, right? I think it's let the framework meet the curriculum, right? So depending upon what kind of training or what kind of training or what kind of mechanism or whatever's being taught, right? If it has relevance to S2C2F, well then reference that. If it has relevance to Salsa, okay, well then reference that. Relevance to Fresco, okay, well then reference that. Hell, relevance across all three, right? If there's like scenario based training of some sort, right? I'm a spitball this one, right? But let's say there's some type of an advanced audit teaching, right? Or how to self audit, how to self attest to whether or not you're following these respective pieces of guidance, and you're saying, well, do we follow things over here from a consumer standpoint? Do we follow things over here from a producer standpoint? Are we archiving things correctly? Are we using tools to secure build pipelines, right? And now, so I'm referencing now S2C2F, I'm referencing Salsa, and I'm referencing Fresca, right? Just as a means of going across what we're doing in the supply chain integrity working group, and how those things could be linked to the education SIG, where the education SIG is lining out, items to be taught across. I don't know whether it's. I only know this because I've seen a few pieces of some of the stuff that come out of the education SIG, but stuff that's taught in high schools, stuff that's taught in colleges, stuff that at the university level, stuff that, all these different initiatives that are taking place. If there's relevance to what we're doing here, and these items can be referenced for, to say, hey, are you doing this? And then of course, the question is, are you doing this? And this is how we're teaching. Of course, the reference is this framework or that framework or something like that, right?
Yes to all the things you said, and the opportunity that we see is that the education SIG is very much focused on the producers of open source and the individual developers, and the gap that we're trying to solve are the consumers of open source, which are really the organizations, the companies. And I think S2C2 from it's been a while. I read it when you first launched it, and I was like, yeah, this looks generally in the right vein of speaking to an organization. And that's what we're trying to figure out with the end user group. How can we create education focused on managers and organizations who are managing the supply chain, not people in college, right?
And so you know what? And this is an excellent opportunity then, right? Because for the education SIG, that should become maybe a focus of theirs too. Up-leveling that piece. I mean, I shrugged the shoulders on this.
Yeah, it's unclear how easy that will be. And there's been conversations back and forth, even the board meeting we had in Tahoe, there wasn't a consensus on that. There's a lot of people that really want to lean hard into that education thing. And it's like, that's great. It might be too disruptive to expand that context. And when a bunch of us kind of got together, we were like, well, end users are kind of the people, they represent the consumers, so that might be the right way to figure out how to make this happen, as opposed to trying to expand and distract the current very focused area. You know what I mean? It's not a perfect fit. That's kind of where we're at the moment, trying to figure out what is the right thing to do. The end users to be the easiest place to pick up the shovel and make that happen. But
that could be a broader conversation.
Right, like you guys, we know there's this intersection between all these other things, and we're trying to make sure that we can connect the dots, right?
Yeah, that could be a broader conversation with the best practices working group at the umbrella, right, between the education, SIG, supply chain integrity educations, best practices, supply chain integrity, end users. We all three talk together to see, what the best way to come about that, because what you're touching on is very important too. And what's funny about that is I made a similar comment with respect to taking out even part of what the education, and this is a side note, right? So I'm going to come off scope a little bit, but inside the education SIG, when they talk about HBCUs and they talk about HSIs and the education there, I said, you know what? That might be so large of an animal that you might need to pull that out and make that its own SIG offshoot of the education SIG, because it's that large of an animal to tackle outside of regular just the stuff that's discussed in the education SIG. So to your point, right, that might be something that needs to come up, and then be its main point of focus.
Yes, I think everywhere everybody's grappling with the overlapping Venn diagrams of all the SIGs and the working groups.
I know that this topic of security tools has kind of come up once before. Within our guide, there's a section. Oh, wait, wrong link. There's a section for right here. This is the implementation guide, and we have links to tools from around the industry, and we've gotten feedback from somebody else within the OpenSSF that this is a tough thing to manage, and
I remember working with you. I knew you looked familiar, Adrian. I was trying to why. Now I remember a couple years ago when you released this, we reached out and we chatted about that in the context of Maven. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
interesting. Yeah.
So there's this guide to security tools here, and do we need to move our recommended tools out of our guide and over here?
Somebody has a very big taxonomy. I don't remember which working group it is, but I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. And again, I just need to find that and find who the right person to talk to is, and then this is a lot of just areas of collaboration that haven't gotten started yet, and so hopefully in the new year we can have a lot of good conversations about this. And then obviously, we can build a plan according to you know, the opportunities that are readily in front of us, and then we can also plop in some longer term roadmap stuff. So so this is very much an incomplete document. Looking forward to collaborating with you all to come up with ideas on unifying and bridging all of these initiatives, so that like OpenSSF kind of communicates things in a consistent way. That was it for today's agenda. We can move to other I guess open topics. Unless we know who to talk to about getting a custom goose icon. I think that's like priority number one.
I thought that was Crow.
I was gonna say, you know, the diagramming society is probably the closest thing. What's the significance of a goose? Is that the mascot?
That's the mascot
OSSF
for
mascot. You want
yeah.
the version of that? Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
That looks like R2D2. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, you know, S2C2 kind of sounds like R2D2. Yeah.
I mean, don't you just go to like Stable Diffusion or something these days and just type that in, and out comes a goose that looks like R2D2?
That's what I was just about
hey.
to say. Like, yeah, whatever that AI generation.
I'm sure DALL-E could whip this thing up in no time at all.
Give me an R2D2 goose. You're done. Boom. Yeah, that's a great idea.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, I'll check with Chrome now to see who it is exactly.
Yeah, that'd be great. All right, fantastic. If there's no other last minute thoughts, we can end early and get some time back.
See you all next year.
Yeah.
See you later.
Yeah. Have a good one, everybody.
Cheers all.
Bye.